Okay, Hooman, you have quite the resume. And so since we're talking to a bunch of solopreneurs, we always like to bring our guest to human level, if you will. So we have an icebreaker question for you. And you've invested in everything from Uber to SpaceX. So if you could start a completely ridiculous business that has zero chance of making money, but would bring you so much joy, what would it be?
So I was actually talking to my wife about this. I was thinking about what I would do next. It's a thing, and I actually don't switch jobs a lot. I've only had three three jobs in my career, believe it or not. And I was really into comics and art and drawing growing up as a kid, and in another world would have been drawing for Marvel Comics. So I have a young daughter, and I think just making Pixar movies, I would like start a studio up in kind of like the way Pixar did, and I think I would just make movies like animated movies for kids.
Oh, I love that. I have young ones too. So
And not a terrible business.
Well, so this is the thing I struggle with the question because I'm like, I think you can actually make a good amount of money, but if I was just doing it for pure joy, that's one. The other one, if I want to really not make money, and this is a dorky thing, is I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm really into complex adaptive systems. So these are like really, really, really complex systems. Like you are a complex adaptive system as a life form. The universe is complex. So I would literally go back and just do my PhD and do research there, or if I was so inclined, start an institute and just study that particular area. These really, really complicated systems.
We got to talk offline. I love this.
I will let you
I,
guys talk offline.
I identify as a geek, so yeah, I love it.
He does. He does. Well, okay. So you may not have had a lot of jobs, but you have made quite an impact. You've built companies that have reached billions of users. You've invested in companies, like I was saying, but also with Stripe and OpenAI, and worked alongside the founders of Uber and Foursquare, which are some pretty big companies. With all of those options in front of you, why did you decide to dedicate this chapter now to solopreneurs?
Yeah. So I was at Expo with the founder, one of the founders of Uber, Garrett Camp, had decided, he really was important to him, and he was passionate about helping be the partner that, we wanted when we were first starting out. Joe, we talked about folks like Ron Conway, in the pre-discussion. He was a great partner, but there aren't a lot of folks like Ron. And so what we were specifically looking at is that the class of venture capitalists that were there, they tended to be more classic bankers, consultants, during our cohort. And what we needed at the 0 to 1 stage was someone who could help us, product market fit, go to market, really tactical issues. And so that was something that I really identify with. Garrett did, Naveen, who's the founder of Foursquare, our other partners, early on, like Roberto Sanabria and others, and just, we really thought that was a missing gap. So we had a passion for founders. Now, when I was doing this for years, I had a couple insights. The first was I love serving founders. It's been the great joy of my life to be one, but also to work with them, either through my family office as an investor or through Expa, through that platform. It's so fun. You learn so much. You learn what you're good at. You learn what you're bad at. It's humbling. The second thing, though, that I learned is in my first company, AdThis, we achieved pretty tremendous scale. And we had about 15 million customers. We helped those 15 million customers drive traffic for about 2 billion unique users that would visit their websites. I mean, it was pretty, for a first job, it was a lot. And, but I missed that. I missed that level of scale. So I love serving founders. I miss the scale. And so when I started thinking about those two together, the largest group of founders, and that is true today, and it was true then, are these businesses of one, are these solopreneurs. And when I started looking at it, I started ironically because of Uber in some ways, the gig economy, that we had a shared kind of view on that because of the history of Expa. But as I opened up and I realized my parents were solopreneurs, I just didn't think of them that way. They were doctors. So you don't think of doctors, as a kid, I didn't, at least, businesses, right? But they had to incorporate, they had to do their books, they had to do the taxes. And so it became personal. So I had this, like, I'm passionate about serving founders, I'm passionate about the scale, and I can identify, I really can, with the customer at a visceral level, both in terms of my experience, but in terms of my parents. And I thought, okay, I realize I stay on things for a very long time. If I'm going to stay on a hill for a while, this is one that I can spend some time on.
I love that. Okay, so speaking of solopreneurs, you have actually said that the safest career move right now might be betting on yourself. And that's a pretty bold statement when we live in a world where most people cling on to that stability. So, can you make the case for someone listening who's on the fence whether they should stay corporate employee or whether they should become a solopreneur?
So I'll give you maybe a broader answer. I'll give you a story, okay, and then I'll tell you my answer.
We love stories.
Great, great. So it was my first business. It was 2008. If you guys remember, it was obviously not an easy time economically, and so I had just had to do a layoff, and I'm in my 20s, and there wasn't a playbook for this, and I would say top 3 worst days of my life, because these are people you care about, the friends, and it wasn't like now where there's a lot of material, online where, you can kind of, or even ask GPT for like playbooks. Like you just kind of, I called my investors. I was like, how do I do this? Like nobody knew. It was really scary. So I'm coming off of this terrible day. I get home, go to my apartment, I get in the elevator, and I walk in, and this woman, I shouldn't even say woman. She was maybe 22, something like that, 23. So I'm not much older at that time, but I was still older. She's just like visibly shaken. And we start going up the elevator. Elevator closes. She starts bawling, and she falls on the ground. She's just crying. And of course, I'm taken aback. What do I do? So I sit down, and I sit on the ground. I said, "Are you okay? How can I help?" And she's like, "I lost my job." And she apparently was I think it was Wells Fargo, layoff, and a big laugh. And she's like, "I just moved here. I got suburban. I can't afford it." And obviously, sucks, right? Like, and she's young and that. And so I end up sitting here with this poor girl, like up and down the elevator. People are coming on and off the elevator here. And I'm like, I didn't do this. You know what I mean? This is not I'm cleaning up the mess, but I didn't do it. And finally I get her off and take her to her floor. And hopefully she ended up okay. But, I remembered that, and it was so visceral for me because I realized something. It's like, there's this illusion of safety with large companies. And even then in 2008, it was there. And having done this, people think, oh, well, these are big companies. These are solid companies. I'm safe. But now more than ever, particularly around tech, when you look at Facebook, Google, Microsoft, I hesitate to say this because I don't run those companies, but it almost seems fashionable to do these layoffs because your stock goes up, right? Like you do it and your stock goes up. And I look at this thing and I remember this girl and I think to myself, do you realize that at that scale, tens of thousands of employees, you're like a cell in a spreadsheet, and there's a CEO who probably doesn't have a personal relationship with you. I'm not dehumanizing the CEO by any stretch or the person. I'm just telling you the facts, right? That's your safety, right? And they're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, they might have a process. You're early, so we're keeping senior people, or we're keeping people at this level or this skill set. Like it's regardless, it boils down to a cell. And so if I was in that position, what I would occur to say, do you really think you're safe? So I'm a big fan. And of course, I've made my career this way, so I'm incredibly biased. I'm bet on yourself. And you can bet on yourself by starting a solo business. You can bet on yourself by starting a startup, or even joining a small company. Well, at least you know the people and you know the finances, and you have some level of transparency. It may not be low risk in the classic sense, like they're running out of money, but they're running out of money. You know what's happening, and I'd rather know what's coming at my face, versus a large company, and you have this like blanket of safety, and you don't know that upstairs, Zuckerberg or whoever is like, oh, well, it's time and we're moving from A to B. So, yeah.
That's true. That you see these layoffs and the companies aren't even struggling. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you don't even, the report, the Wall Street, they have the report to, their quarterly report and everything's ducky. And then, oh, by the way, we're having layoffs, and you're like, I never thought about it. And then look at
but look at the top line stock. The valuations have never been higher. Because they're getting rewarded for it. So it used to be that layoffs were things that you would really dread doing. It would be an indication that the company's not doing well. And now it's an indication that the company is efficient and that the company is AI first. And so the market has retrained the CEOs of the top companies to say, no, this isn't a thing to dread. This, in fact, could be a thing it could be very positive. And now some CEOs are just saying, the narrative is, I'm going to put out a press release and say this is because of AI. It might be, candidly, it might, but
Might not.
the Square layoff half their company because they got so good at AI. I'm not sure. Again, I don't run that company, but I don't know.
Who knows? But yeah, I'm glad you brought it up now because you mentioned 2008, but that is equally relevant today with all of the layoffs that are happening. Well, so for the people that are listening to this and they're like, all right, that's it. You convinced me. I'm going solo. I don't want somebody else making the decisions for me in my career. You've talked about the biggest challenge for solopreneurs isn't necessarily the work itself. It's the back office. So can you paint a picture of what that looks like day to day for someone who's never gone solo, who is like, I'm making the leap now?
Yeah. So the interesting part, and it kind of dovetails into the reason why we exist. And when you're starting a business right from scratch and it's a venture-backed business, like we talk about this a lot at Collective. I have a CFO, and sorry, Jeff, I'm going to mention your name, but Jeff has got a finance department. So I don't think about compliance, me, Hooman, at my business. I don't think about the books getting closed. I don't think about taxes getting paid. I don't think about all of these things that are necessary for the business to run. I'm thinking up a level or two of abstraction because I've been afforded that right because of him and his department. By design, a solo business is never going to have that because they're choosing to run small. My mom had her and an EA and, every once in a while, maybe like a therapist or something like that, right? She just wanted to have that level of business. And that's, again, 80% of American businesses choose that structure. Have the same problems, everything from formation to filing. And so, if you're starting your business, and we could spend hours on this, but you got to think about what formation structure to have. We've talked to people about things like S Corps, for example, if you're making a lot of money, but you could, even having an LLC, there's so many great benefits to that. Separating your business from personal, your liability and whatnot, going ahead and making sure that you have your books done. And people, I think, often think about bookkeeping as like something you do later. And that tends to be a real huge problem because it's not, yes, the initial thing you want to do is for your taxes. And so your tax pro can do their job and it's very critical, but you need to understand your business. You need to understand what your expenses are. You need to look at those reports and say, hey, am I doing okay? How do I change the business? And then, of course, there are things like payroll and whatnot that come very quickly afterwards. And so all of these things, when you stack them together, it's funny, the research basically says you're spending 25% of your time on finance administration before you know it, and people say, well, I don't do that. But you're spending Sunday and then nights and weekends. And all of a sudden you add up, it's like, oh, wait, yep, I am. I'm spending all this time on it. So I don't think it's the most, with humility, I don't think it's the most important part of the business. In fact, I think it's not, but that's why we're here. And I think, and again, back to the geeking out, I actually use the analogy of Amazon Web Services when I talk about our businesses. So back in the day, when you want to start a tech company, you had to go think about your data center, think about what machines to buy, think about the operating system. You had to think about what software was going to be on it, and you would design your software with those constraints in mind. And then if, God forbid, you missed your growth forecast because you were left with all these machines that you've leased. I mean, it was like really scary, okay? And then it comes along, I think it was like 2017, AWS, and you could just click a button and pop up virtual service. Oh, whoa, I made a mistake. Delete. The level of innovation that unlocked is unprecedented. The reason why startups exploded and blossomed in large part was because the cost became a variable cost and it was so easy to build and create. We want to do the same thing for creators and solopreneurs, all these people, because if they can just not worry about this part, this operations piece, just spin up an entity, go ahead and it's all, I'm just going to plug Collective. You have my credit card, you have this and the other, you have a couple of pieces of inputs and it just runs, right? And I could tell you about the experience because I'm a customer and this is our vision. Then what could happen, right? And you don't have any fear of any of this stuff. Like how much innovation could we unlock through society, in particular with AI, given AI is ripping up the revenue per business?
Well, so speaking of AI, what possibilities do you see for solopreneurs with AI these days? Like, sky's the limit?
So I'll go big and I'll go small. I think if you look at the math, and 2023, we got invited to speak at a conference called Collision. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's It's a conference by the Web Summit folks, and pretty big conference. And we did a keynote, and I was racking my brain for a topic, when I went to speak. And I was thinking, I don't know, for whatever reason, I saw this recent sale of a company for like a real large amount of money. And they only had like, I don't know, order of magnitude 20, 30 people. It's an AI company. And I was reading about AI, and I thought, what's the real like crazy economic impact of AI? And if you look at what's AI at the end of the day, it's unleashing productivity. Just like back in the day, there were productivity tools, but it's like orders of magnitude. If you do the math, wait a minute, could a business just become an orchestrator, a conductor, a good business person, whatever, with their agents, and become, effectively $1 billion and exit? Like Instagram was like, I don't know, sub 20 people when they exited for $1 billion. Could there be one person? So I think at the big side, I truly think that you'll see, whether it be like a Pixar style studio, whether it be, a tech company, and it doesn't have to be one person, 3 people. Let's not get sticklers here, but like whatever it is, some absurd amount of value creation by people in the way that you would traditionally think was a larger company. But more, I think, and to me, as attractive and like exciting in the near term, and I'm seeing it right now, is that these businesses are turbocharging, I would say, normal businesses using AI because they're substituting or enhancing some areas. Like we have a guy, he runs a community in a newsletter, and I won't say his name because I don't want to give his financials, but it's like, about fractionals and what have you. Guy went from 200 to like 700K in 6 months. And I think he's going to cross 1 million through automation. And so that to me, so you have this big vision, right? That could be big. And I think there'll be people that go after it, but like more practical, like you'd be making $1 million, $2 million a year. And I think you're going to see this like rising, I don't know what the right word is, but like a middle class, if you will, of folks that are just like crushing it. And I think it's become normal.
No, so I just wrote an article or a post on, it was a blog and a post on LinkedIn, that about the $1 billion solopreneur. And, you think about it and you say, well, what if there were 3 of them, that actually became $1 billion businesses with one person? And then you look at 30 million solopreneurs, and so that's 0.00001% of solopreneurs. So, it's exciting, it's interesting, but it doesn't really affect the vast majority of us. And, our position is that being a solopreneur is a great way to build a life-first business, right? That you're basically designing a business to serve the life you want to live. And if you want to scale like crazy, why give up employees? I'm wondering, you have a critique on that, or is that something you agree with, or just curious?
I think it really is context dependent. Like, what is your business and what are you trying to accomplish? I think people get a bit dogmatic with these types of things. And again, I think we were the first people to say $1 billion business in 2023, right? So like now it's become commonplace, and I think people are enamored with this concept. But they're like, even when we say businesses, when I'm really talking about owners, operators that are really, really small, and they just want to keep it small, whether it's like 1 person up to 10 people, this is the backbone. This is like the real economy. And so I think some businesses you're better off if you and your friends want to hang out for like, and 2 of you, it's great. Sometimes, because I think they talk a lot about like the flip side of this is, yes, AI can be a partner and improve your productivity. I actually think you can improve your creativity, but there's something to be said about doing something with, 1 or 2 people that bring out the best in you, and they complement you. And it's not just about their skill set. It's about something about their personality that motivates you, that drives you, that keeps you moving forward. And, the dynamic of a team is not something that is lost in terms of the value in this ecosystem. So I think it's up to the entrepreneur, Joe, to kind of like figure that out. And they shouldn't feel bad if they're like, like I have a lot of people, so.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying if you wanted to be a billionaire, you would probably say not give up employees as your kind of first stop in the process. You'd say, well, maybe I'm solo now, but as soon as I can hire some people, I'm going to hire them.
I think so. I think so. But I think it's going to be an interesting couple of years. I really do think it's going to be an interesting couple of years, but my gut is in like 5 years, you're going to see some like pretty wild economic outcomes, like really wild. And it's not just the Anthropic and OpenAI. I'm talking about like everyday people that you're just like, I mean, you're already starting to see it. It's like, it's pitter pattering there. So
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just, I think it's going to give what you said before. A lot of people are going to basically have a lot more security and freedom because they've decided to bet on themselves and applied the modern tools the way that makes them able to actually make a living the way they want to in the life that they want. And I think we're seeing a lot of that happening now, which is great.
Well, and speaking of these stories, you have thousands of them from what, like 200 plus types of jobs or yeah, job types inside Collective. What do the solopreneurs who thrive have in common, and what do the ones who struggle tend to get wrong?
I think the ones that we've seen that are the most successful, and this is probably not atypical of a successful business regardless of the scale, extreme focus on like the core competency. They're just like really, really good at their atomic unit of work, whatever it is. Whereas some of these other ones, they'll tend to take on, I was talking to one lady and the clients look all different. You know what I mean? And so she doesn't have like this repeatable model, if that makes sense. And maybe this is I'm injecting kind of a venture bias into this, but I've tended to see like people who do well, it's just like boring, like not to keep harping on, my mom and dad, but like a psychiatrist sees patients. If they're really good at it, they have N patients and they charge M per hour, and so like the atomic unit is solid and it's needed and there's a demand there. And so it's really a question of scale and execution. That's kind of like where I've seen more success is when you just really like master what you're doing versus, the spray and pray, like, hey, I'm consulting. I'm a business consultant. And then like, well, I have one customer that wants this and one customer wants this, one customer wants this. And it turns out, well, you're not really great at any of those three things. So when you want to get your next three customers, it dries up because you haven't built any track record, you haven't built any competency. And so again, it's the same thing I would say to a larger business, frankly. It's just, you have to really be violently good at what you're doing.
That's like so true. And even if you are good at all three things, you're still not efficient, and you're not making the kind of money you could be if you were focused. So it's a great point. I mean, across the board.
You get a lot of false positives, Carly, I think, when people start because they have a network and they'll get initial clients, and that can almost be the worst thing that ever happened, where they get a couple people that are just like ready to help them out. And they're like, oh, the business is going to work. And then they want to go build an S Corp and they want to go. And then all of a sudden you're like hit a wall. Business didn't do as well as I thought. And you go look at, their client list and you're like, well, you're running three businesses. You're not running one.
Yeah. Well, so if someone listening today has a skill, side hustle, or they just have a growing resentment for their 9 to 5, what do you think the first concrete step is that you would tell them to take this week if they're interested in solopreneurship?
The very first step. So I don't know if I have like a great generic step that's going to give you like an aha but I'll tell you what I would do and what I do. I think the reason people don't start businesses is because they look at the thing as there's this famous adage, the journey of 1,000 steps starts with a single step. And I think they look at the 1,000 and they look at the end and say how hard it is. Like people often ask me, especially younger kids, like, how do you start business? It seems so overwhelming. Like I think of all the people in the org and what do you do here and here and here? And it's like, well, if you just reduce it down and say like the first thing I had to do, the very first thing I had to do was start a folder on my desktop, call it a project name, open up a doc and dump all my thoughts out about what that business looks like. I started my business, right? That's the first step. And you have to, there's this book called The War of Art. And if you read it, it's really interesting about creativity. And there's a lot of parallels in entrepreneurship, but the idea is there's this force called the resistance. And like, you don't not start a business because you're like, oh, I'm not going to write my great symphony. You're like, well, I'll write it tomorrow. That's what kills you. And so my advice is don't try to think that you have to have this gestalt aha where like you see the matrix and like everything's perfect one day and then the business is just going to flow through you. It's not a thing. Just start, write it down, and then have the discipline to create a process where you're going to hit it every day. You're going to do something every day to try to move it forward. If you do that, then I think it moves, then you start having that, then you start seeing momentum build. And like some days are shitty. I'm sorry, I'm not enough to swear, but
You're
like,
good.
it just, you don't do anything. Like it just like, I'm like staring at a blank sheet, but you know what? You showed up. And if you keep doing that every day, the compounding is tremendous. And that to me is like, people ask like, how do you succeed? I'm like, don't run out of money and don't give up.
Easy enough. It's funny because the next question, apparently this is the motivational part of our interview today, because the next question I have for you that we ask all guests is your favorite quote about success. But I'm already feeling like I'm running up the stairs like Rocky after your last answer. But do you have a favorite quote about success?
Yeah. So I have a lot. Actually, every week I share a quote with my team. I call it POV from great entrepreneurs. So I'm a big fan of quotes. So this was actually both easy and hard for me to think about. Um, One from Bezos, I believe it's all overnight successes take about 10 years. And I think that's really salient in this world of AI. Everything happens really quickly, and it's not interesting anymore if you're not growing quickly. Um, I think about Amazon a lot when we're building our company, because what we're doing is we're trying to create, this autonomous back office, and all the magic for the member, our customer, is in the back end, right? Whether we do the books with 1,000 people or 1,000 robots, if they're done well, they're done easily. I think the outcome is really what's critical to them. And I remember talking to this guy, Jeff Wilke, and Jeff at the time was co-running most of Amazon with a guy named Andy Jassy for Jeff Bezos. So Jeff ran, I think, consumer, and Jassy ran enterprise. Obviously, Jassy became CEO, and Wilke had left and started a new company. And he's a Pittsburgh guy. He shows up like in a Steelers hat. Sorry, Joe. And like, he goes in and he's like, we're talking, just jamming. He's a super smart guy. And he goes, how long do you think it's going to take for this to work? I know it's just starting. And I knew, obviously, if I said a year or two, he's going to be like, you're crazy. So I said 5. He goes, I like 7 or 8. 7 or 8. He's like, when I joined Amazon, and I might misquote here, but it was like, I think it was 98 or something like that. He was saying, like, early, but not 93 early. He's like, yeah, it took us till about, 2000s, 2005, 2006 for like the Amazon system to work. And I walked away thinking to myself, wow, like the discipline that you have, if to just think at that level, to think, and it's not just him, like Musk and SpaceX, they're about to go public. You think about even OpenAI, like people talk about how fast this stuff goes. The first couple of years of OpenAI were like crickets. You know what I mean? Like nothing happened for years until the ChatGPT moment occurred, and everyone was like, oh wow, this is a thing. Well, there were people working for, I don't remember, 5-6 years to try to like tinker around until that happened, and a lot of money spent. So it keeps me through it. I would tell people, if you really want to play this game, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Such good words of wisdom, and especially in the age of AI. Well, Hooman, this has been, I've just so appreciated your insights today. I'd say it's one of the most unique, like, set of insights we've had, right, Joe? Like, just from your
Oh,
perspective.
definitely. Well, because you've got that kind of big picture Silicon Valley perspective, and now taking it down to the level of the solopreneur, which is really, really great, really
Yes.
interesting.
So thank you. But where can people learn more about you, your company? Give us all the links.
Great. Well, good news. I am Googleable. I'm SEOable. So my name is Hooman Radfar. So you Google me, I'm really easy to show up. And my handle is often just at Hooman Radfar. So you can find me on LinkedIn and on X as at Hooman Radfar. And then also my email is just first name at Collective. So collective.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been so fun.
Thanks for having me. I'm passionate about this, and I'm glad you guys are bringing the stories of and kind of the gospel, if you will, not to get too spiritual about this. I become more passionate about this every year, and I really do think that it's a movement, and people who are part of this, while they're alone, should just celebrate together, because there's a really large community of people that are creating a new lifestyle that's great.
We always say flying solo in business doesn't mean you're alone.
My first blog post was alone but together, and that was why we picked Collective as a brand. So we
love it.
really do think it.
I love it. Well, and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, leave that 5-star review. It helps us spread the word to other people who want to become solopreneurs or are already on that journey. Share this episode with a friend and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. And we'll see you next week on The Aspiring Solopreneur.